Check, check. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you here at JetBrains. As you may know, this meetup will be held in English for various reasons, and the organizer, Mitya, will tell you more about it and the reasons behind it. I'm Andrei Vlasovskih. I'm the technical lead of PyCharm here at JetBrains. And I would like to welcome you at our office. Feel free to grab a few stickers with PyCharm and JetBrains logos over there. There will be 2 talks today and several lightning talks. And Mitya will tell you more about it. So welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. We were sort of afraid that you would not come because, you know, English, but you still did it, and you're awesome. You really are. I would like to tell you a couple of words. I will do it briefly about why we're doing that. Because, you know, our speakers today are Russian-speaking people, and you are Russian-speaking people, so why bother? Because basically we live in European city. As you might know, St. Petersburg is 4th largest European city in the world, and it deserves better. It deserves to be integrated in Europe. It deserves to be integrated in the tech scene of the world. And when I came to, for example, Lisbon or Istanbul, I was visiting the Python events in English. So why couldn't I visit events here in St. Petersburg? So we just went for it, and this is the first English PiterPy meetup, and this is great. We think a couple of words about how we will proceed. As Andrei said, there will be 2 main talks and a few lightnings, one of them even from me. And you also can give us a lightning. It's very simple. You don't even have to show us slides. You can do lightning without slides. That's perfectly fine. And please don't hesitate to speak in English. I mean, ask questions to the speakers. I mean, communicate in English on the coffee break, because English is great, and it's the main language, the main tool you will use in your professional career, I hope, because you would want to stay integrated with the world, integrated with other job markets, integrated with other great tech people on the online and offline both. So please don't be afraid, don't be ashamed of your English level, because here and now and ever we're learning, as you might know, the phrase fake it till you make it. This is a great statement, great idea of learning in the process, and this is what we do in technologies actually. Please don't be ashamed of your level of English, that's perfectly fine. And we will also try to speak slowly at these talks. You will try? Okay. Just for you to get a better understanding of the talk. So, welcome. Thank you for coming, and I will pass the mic to Stepa.
Guess it takes it. Oh, it works. It's always weird to hear your voice from the speakers. So greetings, everyone. I'm both excited and nervous to be here. But first of all, thank you for coming. For us, this is really an experiment. So yeah, thank you. My name is Stepan. I work for a company called SpeakApp. We make a voice messenger, and we have another product coming soon. Today I'm going to talk about drawing inspiration from languages, nature, and people. Give me a second to show my notes. Okay, so let's get started. Before we begin, I want to kind of warn you that the talk is going to be a little bit abstract, and you might not learn something concrete from it, but what I hope to do is to share some ideas and to inspire you. So yeah, let's get started. So I want to start my talk with a quote by Ludwig Wittgenstein. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. So what does it mean? I believe that in order to think beyond what we used to think, to solve problems we've never been able to solve, to understand concepts we've never been able to understand, and to just basically grow and to evolve, we have to reach to other languages, cultures, nature, people, and even different media. So, surprisingly, the first example I want to give is about Russian language. So, assume we have a simple English sentence that says, our cat gave birth to 4 kittens, and translated to Russian, наша кошка родила 4 котят. So, the interesting part about Russian is that sentence structure is encoded into word endings, which allows us to freely rearrange words inside the sentence. And we can change it to something like that. 4 котят родила наша кошка. Котят 4 родила кошка наша. So, those sentences might sound a little bit weird and in Master Yoda style, but they're still correct sentences. And if you want, I mean, we've managed to rearrange the word, and we didn't have to change words, actual words. If you want to do the same in English, you will have to change the words, obviously. So yeah, obviously it adds a lot of complexity to the language. If Russian wasn't my first language, I will never been able to learn it. I'm pretty sure. But this complexity adds a lot of freedom. This is what makes Russian such a great language for literature, poetry, and nowadays for hip-hop. Yeah, and the thing is, you can apply the same principles to designing systems. An obvious example is networking, where packets can come out of order, and it's protocol's job to rearrange them back together, or out of order execution in the processors, or even redundancy in QR codes. Yeah, and this is basically what this talk is about. It's about finding those parallels between technology, languages, and stuff like that. And even though I was comparing Russian to English in Russian's favor, I want to say that English has other great properties. First of all, it's a relatively packed and efficient language for communication. And you might have heard that during World War II, American pilots were more effective with radio communication comparing to Japanese pilots, just because English is simpler. I wish I could tell more about Oriental languages like Japanese or Chinese, but I've learned nothing from watching all this anime. But speaking of pilots, I'm pretty sure Russian pilots were efficient too, but in another way, like, you know what I mean. Yeah, and of course English is more widespread, and but we'll get back to this analogy a bit later. So yeah, look for parallels. Excuse me. Another lesson, it's important to stay hydrated. So let's get back to the quote. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world, and try to apply it to programming languages. So technically, any Turing-complete language can be considered limitless. People do interesting stuff with Minecraft, Redstone, with sendmail configs, or with C++ templates, or languages like brainfuck. This is all cute and interesting, but doesn't mean it's useful. But still, in a way, it's every language that is Turing-complete is limitless. But different languages provide different paradigms that we use to solve our problems. And what we need to do is just to explore those languages and paradigms to, you know, add new tools to our toolbox. and yeah, to expand our horizons. So let's go take a tour of computer science history. Raise your hand if you know what this thing is. That's great. So yeah, this is a punch card. So machines talk numbers, and each operation is a numeric code followed by an operand or an address. And in the beginning, the programs were written using the punch cards. It was a tedious and error-prone process, but it kind of got the job done. And after some time, assembly was invented, an actual language with symbolic representation of those instructions. So in a way, it was a breakthrough, because assembly freed engineers from memorizing all those numbers, and it made code actually readable. Yeah, so it was one of the first languages to fuse human languages and machine languages. But when assembly was invented, the old school operators who used to punch in the numeric codes, they weren't interested at all. John von Neumann, the guy who invented von Neumann architecture, which is still used in modern computers, was known to get angry at his students who used precious machine time to compile assembly to machine code. He was furious. And surprisingly, the next wave of programming languages was met with the same kind of resistance. I can write a better assembly that your Fortran compiler ever could, they say. So languages like Algol and Fortran introduce a lot of new concepts like type systems, procedures, better control flow loops and stuff like that. They made programming much more humane and more accessible to even more people. As far as I know, Algol has been used for teaching algorithms like for a while during the 20th century, but now it's mostly Python. Anyway, there's one important thing that those languages introduced apart from actual features is the concept of, of portability. They were portable. And this is very important, because if you spoke PDP assembly, you could only talk to PDP computers. But if you spoke Algol, you could talk to any machine in the world. And the same with human languages. If you can only speak Russian, you can only talk to other Russian speakers. But if you speak like English or Spanish, you have much better coverage. The common characteristic of programming languages is their syntax. Syntax is a set of rules that defines the language, this language's features and semantics. Syntax can be clever, can be humane, can be expressive or not, but syntax can also be very limiting, because if the language syntax is already finished, you can't extend it. You either have to wait for new standard for this language, or build your own tools that generate this language or something like that. But there was, not yet. So compilers work by translating your source code to machine code, but they don't do it directly. There are a lot of intermediate steps involved, and one of them is generating abstract syntax tree, which is a tree-like structure with syntactic information removed. So there was one language that decided to skip this step completely. Any idea what is the language I'm going to talk about? Definitely, it's Lisp. So yeah, in Lisp there is no distinction between arithmetic operation, function call, or control statement. Everything is built from primitive atoms that are assembled into the list, and the program is actually one huge list. Most Lisp implementations have a macro system that can be used to build a Lisp implementation just using those macros and few basic primitives. Yeah. So with language like that, you are no longer restricted by the syntax. You can build your own languages, tailored to your own specific needs and domains. So, apart from its radical syntax, Lisp pioneered a lot of new concepts like garbage collection, higher order functions, dynamic typing, REPL, and stuff like that. Those are very powerful tools and can be used as building blocks for many other language features. If you take JavaScript, for example, nowadays it's kind of a decent language, but not so long ago it was a total disaster. But JavaScript managed to stay useful just because it had first-class functions, and people build a lot of stuff on top of this first-class functions. So yeah, this is a very powerful concept. The Lisp was way ahead of its time. The first versions were created like in 1950s, and it took a while for industry to pick up those features. And since it was way ahead of its time, people even made special machines to run Lisp, like because it was hard to run garbage collection and stuff like that on off-the-shelf hardware. So yeah, even though Lisp syntax is still considered radical by some people, Lisp DNA in one form or another lives in many modern languages, whether it's a modern Lisp implementation like Clojure or a language with a more conservative and traditional syntax like Python or JavaScript. So if there is one book I'm going to recommend today is Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs, aka SICP. So when I was preparing the talk, I kind of thought about saying you should learn this and that after each part. Like when I talk about assembly, I wanted to say you should learn assembly to understand machine and stuff like that. But the thing is, with this book, you can go through the whole computer science history using just one language and one book, because you will learn to build abstractions, domain-specific languages. You will build your own interpreters, virtual machines, and compilers for those virtual machines. These are just the main abstractions that used in compilers and stuff like that, so you should definitely check out this book. Before we continue. So, we solve problems by explicitly describing each step, but what if we could just describe the problem and let the machine find the solution? I think people ask these questions even before computers, like linear programming can be kind of related to that. There are constraint satisfaction problems and logic programming. And logic programming kind of got a lot of interest during 20th century for people who are building logical system in Lisp or specialized languages like Prolog, where you just have a few simple atoms and you define predicates and rules and stuff like that, and you let the inference engine to kind of do the work for you. And Prolog was used to build those things called expert systems, which were promising to replace real experts in their fields, like people promised to build medical system, chemistry system, stuff like that. The idea was that you will just ask it and it will give you an answer. But the thing is, even though they were simple and understandable, because it's still source code, it's like when we hesitate to commit a binary to the Git, but we are always eager to commit proper source code. So yeah, in a way, expert system was simple in this regard, but they required a lot of manual labor because actual experts had to type in all this stuff, and they couldn't really work alone without computer specialists. Yeah, and you basically had to program each and every rule. So the idea that that machines find a solution for you didn't really work. And the approach I described was part of this thing called symbolic AI, research direction that was primary until late 1980s. Basically, it used logic and language to represent intelligence. And it was, as I mentioned previously, it was cursed by manual labor and limits of logic. I'm not going to go too deep into this stuff, but basically, mathematical logic is an artificial construct and has its own limitations, described like in Russell paradox or Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So yeah, they were burning money like crazy. There was a lot of investment, and the hype was similar to the hype we see today in modern AI or blockchain and stuff like that. And yeah, it ended at some point with a period called AI winter that was characterized by lack of funding, interest, and progress in the field. But there was another school of thought, artificial neural networks. And back in the day, I mean, like many things in computer science, artificial neural networks were invented way back in the day. But back then, there wasn't enough computer power to run large networks and to process large amounts of data. And to be honest, there wasn't enough data to process. So the idea was there, but it wasn't kind of useful. Yeah, it was just some sort of dream. But fast forward to modern times, and artificial neural networks are back in the game. People do awesome stuff with them. Yeah, and it's kind of a breakthrough in a way. We're still far from real AI, but still, this stuff is cool. And as you can see on the picture, those artificial neural networks were inspired by real neurons that fire in your brain. And this is where we go into the nature. Nature can be a source of inspiration for many, many things. Not just like AI. They're even more down to earth stuff. So, for example, Velcro stripes, those things. They were inspired by burdock seeds, or bullet trains. So this is a more complex example. So when Japanese were creating their bullet trains, making them going fast wasn't the biggest issue. The problem was aerodynamics. So like imagine a train going through a tunnel at high speed, and it builds a tremendous amount of air pressure. So when it escapes, it's just destructive and loud, and basically not usable. So obviously it can go slower or brake earlier, but what's the point of making high-speed trains, right? So nerds being nerds, one of the elite engineers was a bird watcher, and he was really into birds. And he's noticed that there are a few birds that jump into water hunting, and when they jump, they almost don't make any splash at all. So he thought that there are very nice aerodynamic properties to these birds. So as a result, bird trains. Look how similar they are. So yeah, another picture of trains. Beautiful, isn't it? So yeah, the idea is that nature already spent billion years of evolution like solving those problems, so why not use those solutions, right? And even the idea of evolution itself can be applied to programming by the means of genetic programming, which becomes kind of popular again in combination with neural networks. And here's another example. This is from AutoCAD. So on the left there is a skateboard track, on the right a motorcycle swing arm. So they just specify some kind of constraints and let the machine figure out a proper shape. In the end, those details are lighter than normal details and more robust, and they're basically better. The only problem is that they're expensive to make because you have to 3D print them, and 3D printing titanium is not cheap and easy. But hopefully one day, yeah, same can be applied to architecture. So this whole thing the whole thing about nature is called biomimicry. There is a whole movement that tries to learn from nature and apply those lessons to engineering problems. You should definitely check out those sites like biomimicry.org, asknature.org. There are a lot of interesting examples. Yeah, and to just get inspired. Let's talk about media. So we went a bit higher into the clouds with neural networks and generated design and stuff like that. But now I want to talk about more down-to-earth things, more applied to practice. So the thing is that code is not always enough. Sometimes you need different media to represent your ideas and to analyze those ideas to solve your problems. So I'm going to give an example from my practice. Let's assume you have a speech recording, right? And you need to remove silence from this recording. And when you record a message, voice message, or just, recording, machine sees this stuff. It's just a bunch of numbers. And if you know how the sound works, they basically, 1 second of recording, there is like about 44,000, depending on sample rate, 44,000 samples. And you can't just manipulate one sample by sample. So you can try to solve this problem in your head, but it will be kind of hard to do because this is how machines see the sound and how you see the sound with your code, right? And hearing it doesn't really help. So first thing you can do is to visualize the wave. Now we already see those points where the silent is. We already can have some sort of insight into the signal, right? And then we just split it into windows and calculate some sort of average for each window. In this case, it's RMS. And then we see, okay, we got those windows. Let's just tune them because they're too big. We play with window size. Now we can just start to skip subsequent windows that are below some specific threshold. And we got our signal with silence removed. This is an example where a different media than we used, like we started with sound and with code and a language, and we used visualizations, a graphical media to help us, to aid us in solving our problems. So, yeah, obviously. Visualizations help solve your problems, so you should definitely use them. And for some, it might sound obvious, but like if you're a backend developer, sometimes it's kind of hard to get your head around it. So I definitely recommend to start using it, because like in scientific communities, people has been using visualizations for a while, and not just for finding insights in their data, but also for sharing the ideas and communicating those ideas to other people. And many industries use sophisticated software which provides visual tools to work with your data to achieve the stuff you will not be able to achieve just by code. But if you take a look at the lower right corner, this is how web development looks. Yeah, this is weird. There have been many attempts to kind of solve this, but of no avail. But hopefully one day. I actually stole those 2 slides. I mean, this whole picture from Webflow, an app that tries to solve this problem. So maybe maybe Webflow or Framer will be able to fix that. So yeah, language is an important trait of human species, but we can also see, hear, taste, smell, touch, perceive temperature and pain, balance, feel time, and so much more. So let's get beyond the language. That's all, folks. Thank you. You can feel free to ask any questions. We have plenty of time because I finished fast. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question in English, feel free to ask in Russian. We will translate that as well, but try English as well.
Okay, any questions?
No questions. Thankfully.
Yeah, actually, not really a question, more like maybe I wasn't giving too much attention while tweeting about your talk, so I was gonna ask you to give me like a short summary, maybe 1-2 sentences, like what was your talk about?
That was my biggest fear, to be honest, that people will not understand. But the thing is that there is no single thing, and you're kind of supposed to read between lines. But the whole idea is that we can't just use single tool for everything. We just need to reach to other tools, to other languages, to other media. We should reach to nature and stuff like that. And yeah, I was just trying to give you examples to inspire you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Stepan, thank you for your talk. Your talk was about drawing inspiration from languages, from nature, and from people. I've heard about languages and nature. What about people?
That's a good question. I kind of forgot about that. So I'm just going to give an example that I've heard from another talk. So there was a guy who was talking about data sourcing. So you know what data sourcing is? It's like not like a traditional database where you can just read and write fields. It's just one large journal of transactions of data. You never remove something from a log, right? And he gave a very interesting example about one profession that's been using data sourcing like forever, and it was accountants. So a ledger in accounting is basically a data like a huge log. You just don't remove fields from your ledger. You just add debit or credit, and this is a good parallel between technology and professions and people that you can be inspired from. But obviously, if we're talking about different media, go ahead and reach to people who work in these different media, to designers, to sound engineers, to other kind of engineers, to biologists, to whoever to bird watchers, I don't know. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so thank you for your talk. I wanted to, I mean, you said about Lisp, and the idea came to my mind. Well, there are two questions. First one is whether there is a language to write languages. I mean, there is that thing that you call Quine when you run a program and it generates another program, and I guess it's easier. I mean, you can do that in Lisp because in Lisp data structures are language and language is data structure, but still, are there any good examples? And the related question is, I've heard that there is, I mean, you said about generating front-end, generating layouts and HTML markup and stuff from images, but I've thought about, I remember I heard that it is possible to generate programs, I mean to eliminate programmers and to generate programs by writing some cool AI or stuff, and I wonder, what do you know about that? Because I've heard just that fact, and that was all.
Thank you. So, I guess it's kind of complex because you don't always have to create some very intelligent system to to generate the right something for you. It doesn't always have to be some sort of AI. And I guess in a way, your second question answered that yeah, you can just use existing tools, and or I mean different tools like editors or stuff like that to generate your programs. But I don't know, there were attempts that, I mean, if you take that was a good question because you kind of got me here. I don't know. I can't give you an easy answer, but there were many attempts to solve this problem from different angles, and I guess it all depends on a specific problem. You can start from something simple like just generating stuff, because it's ridiculous that these days we manually write APIs, and we can, like, for example, design APIs that actually automatically talk to each other and like discover each other, and we don't have to write bindings. And you go as high as possible, like just specifying constraints for some hard task and letting the machine figure it out for you. Just different aspects, different to different tasks, I guess. Another unanswered question.
Any further questions? I wasn't expecting you so fluent. You're freaking people out. Look at them, they're regretting
Sorry
coming
about that. I'm really trying to speak slower, but I mean, yeah, sorry about that.
No, I guess that's okay. Any other questions?
Thank you for your talk. It's maybe a kind of philosophical question. Once I got an idea that science on its own is just process of science is kind of reverse engineering nature around us. So we don't have its rules, orders, but we try, we sit, we observe, then just put it all together and use it in our technology. So what do you think about it? So basically, do you feel science the same, or maybe I'm wrong here?
So you mean, are there some specific rules we can use to analyze, or what was the question?
What you talked about getting inspiration from from the world around us. So basically, if we look through history of science, all the science is nature we understood and tied to our needs to implement something we want. So we figure out all these rules and just plan and implement them. So basically, that's the only way of science.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Okay, so that's what I just wanted to say this.
No, I guess in a way there's still a lot of stuff that is left unanswered, but the thing is we are not like, we are people in the industry, we are more engineers than scientists, and we are not always follow the scientific method, I guess. There is just a lot of copy-pasting that goes into the industry, and we don't always like dig deeper, and we don't always try to see those parallels. And yeah, maybe it wasn't like that before, but nowadays, yeah, it's just we're not always using the scientific method, to be honest. And yeah, that will be nice. And yeah, this, I guess, that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
So there's a saying, like, the programmer that learns to code in C will always write program in C in any language that he can put his hand on. Like, I personally saw this in action, and it can be kind of freaky, but it works exactly like that. Do you have like some tips and tricks how to break out of this, you know, duckling syndrome from this, like the mold that you got very, very early on?
I don't know, like I guess if you can't find your habits programming in C, you can just program and go.
Well.
But yeah, that's a good question, because personally I've met people who just couldn't switch. They were just, whatever they touched, they were writing C. I guess it's just, you just have to start early. I mean, yeah, because I guess the modern generation, they're not always like that, because like imagine growing up like imagine learning to code in 90s or 80s. There wasn't that much choice, and you probably was just using a single language or two, and that's it. But these days there are so many languages, and people actually have trouble like learning them all. So I think for the current generation, it won't be such a big problem, because yeah, there's just so many languages and so many paradigms, and you can kind of resist from learning them. Another interesting example that some paradigms from way before they getting popular in some ways, if you take functional programming and like purely functional data structures, they're getting popular in user interface development. If you take React, Redux, all this stuff, this is where mainstream use case, basically creating a web application, introduces a lot of concepts that previously were only used for, in academic circles. So yeah, I guess, yeah.
So basically, kill all the programmers that learned to code in the 80s. All right, thanks.
No, I mean, yeah, there is some sort of correlation, but of course not. There are a lot of awesome people who are able to change their mind.
Don't forget CS50, like for example in Harvard, C is taught first. So does it mean everybody who watches that, who studies at Harvard, is inflicted by this incurable disease and they cannot switch their minds? Okay, I'm sorry.
Or was it?
So anything else? Come on, guys.
Okay, I guess we can proceed with the discussion later because thank you, Stepa.
Thank you.
Stepa doesn't just disappear. Stepa is here, and yeah, sorry. And you can proceed with the discussion with Stepa later in online or offline. Stepa is here.
Where is my T-shirt?
That's a good question. I will. Yeah, we
don't work for free.
You're absolutely right. We have your T-shirt, but we will give you just a little bit later. I have a few pieces of new information coming right up. First of all, we have a translation, as you might know, and 6 people watching it. And yes. But one of those people is Paul Everett. Who know him? Yes. Okay, you know him. Paul Everett is a JetBrains employee, and first and foremost, Paul Everett is one of the most famous Python person in the world. And in about 1 week, at September 18, Paul Everett will provide a talk at our Meetup here, I guess. Again in English, please don't be afraid. So this is sort of a rehearsal, and please come to our event at September 18. All information are in online. And this is the website. We have a lot of online. We have most active Telegram chat. Please join for the discussion. Another, thank you. Paul Everett will talk about Python. The development of Python, the development of Python ecosystem in the 90s, because he was the person who stood up at the beginnings of the Python itself. And in fact, Guido van Rossum himself worked for the Paul Everett sometime. So yeah, please come. Besides that, we will have breakfast tomorrow. Who knows about PiterPy breakfast? Please raise your hand. Oh. Surprisingly, because this is great opportunity to meet new people, great opportunity to talk, and great opportunity to eat breakfast. Besides that, what I'm forgetting? Yeah, and another real reason, another piece of information coming right up is that there are actually English-speaking people today. They do not speak Russian, and so this is not for just an experiment. Please don't hesitate to speak in English with our guests. Besides that, you will have a chance to practice your English in more serious conditions on our PiterPy conference, because our PiterPy conference are held in November, fully in English. All threads are in English, and we think it's great, and most of the speakers are non-Russian. They're coming from New York, Berlin, Warsaw, and stuff like that. So please take in mind that we have fully English European PiterPy conference. And for now, we're going to the coffee break, I guess, for like 5-10 minutes maybe. Yes, before proceeding with our second talk. Thank you. Вижу, да. Спасибо.
1, 2.
Okay, I guess we will proceed with the second part of our event. Please take a seat or don't. We don't care. And we are...
Я просто специально, чтобы из-за рекординга. Здесь, короче, у тебя будут все слайды.
Nice.
Можешь видеть, что здесь есть. Вроде бы кликер работал, я не проверял.
Да, я так. Оп-оп. Спойлеры, спойлеры.
Yeah, we are proceeding with our second talk, which will be interesting too, I guess. And let's welcome our second speaker. Please welcome.
Yeah, I guess we'll wait a little bit for the guys to return, and then we'll start. Come on. Yeah. So, yeah, let's start. So my name is Stanislav Rogovsky, as you can see on the slide. I guess this slide will be the most beautiful slide of all of my presentations, because all the other things are either screenshots or just black and white stuff, because I didn't bother to include any funny pictures as Stopa did, so sorry. Yeah. So what I will be talking about, I mean, this question, the topic of my presentation it's kind of clickbaity, and first of all I wanted to kind of ask the question that I'm asking. It's not really a question, it's a statement, but still I wanted to ask the question, is it possible to write an idea in one day? And the answer is kinda. So I managed to do this in 1 week. By week I mean that I did it in my spare time on weekdays, and I spent, say, like 5 hours each day on weekends, so in total that might be like say 15 or 20 work hours. But still I think it's very small time to accomplish something that big. By big I mean that I was able to support some kind of cool idea-like features in my custom language. Well, more on that later. And why did I thought about that? Well, on the previous meetup there was a guy who talked about Grisha Ivanov. He talked about the cool idea of language server protocol, and I was so fascinated by that idea that I decided, well, I might just as well go ahead and write myself my own language server. Well, then I thought that writing a language server for something like C++ or Python, it's boring, because, I mean, there are already compilers and everything for those languages. But then I remembered that we have a language at Wargaming. We call it Unbound, and we use it to write layouts for our UI in our game. I mean, we at Wargaming, we create a game called World of Warships. It's about ships which kind of shoot at each other, and it's a very cool game. It's very interesting. I played myself, so I encourage you to do that too. Yeah. But yeah, I want to give you an introduction what the technologies for our client look like, so you'll have a little more background on why do we need Unbound and what it is, what does it look like. I'll show you this, the examples of the code. So we use, obviously, C++ for something heavy, like rendering or game logic that is built into the game engine. We use Python for high-level logic, and we have like hundreds of thousands of code of Python too, unfortunately. We have ActionScript for UI, and well, because we use ActionScript just because it integrates very well with an engine that we are using, and we use Unbound. So what is Unbound? Unbound, it's complicated. It's like a language that allows designers to create interfaces, but the designers do not need to know any kind of programming language. So it looks like a mix from HTML that you can define blocks. It looks like mix from CSS in a way that you can define styles. You can save them for later and then reuse. And it has a little bit of logic that you don't really ask your Python programming colleague every time you need to write something with logic. You can write simple stuff, and it's, as far as I know, it's usually just in a way of JavaScript ternary expressions, and that's kind of all that it has. But still, it's a pretty cool thing. It allowed us to write interfaces for our game. Well, we usually hire the people who are mostly with designer background, and then they can create the interfaces, and it's pretty easy to write this, especially if you already know how to write HTML. So this is kind of examples of the syntax. It's Lisp-like. I guess it has this kind of structure just because, I mean, for anyone who wants to parse the language later, Lisp-like syntax is a little bit more easy to parse. I mean, you can just write a recursive parser, and that's all. It's a simple stuff. On the right bottom, you can see the example of CSS. It's a kind of CSS style. On the left, you can see the example of a block. Here, you can see the more complex example of the logic. We don't really need to go into the details. I just wanted to show you the syntax. It's both simple and complex. It's simple because it's Lisp-like. It's complex because it has a lot of stuff going on. I mean, my grammar, it was like 300 lines. And I think it's a lot, but still. Yeah, so so I was talking about language server, and I wanted to write one, so I decided to write one for our language. First of all, I wanted to give a little more introduction about how one can write a support for their language. I mean, if you have a language, and it's something that you want to execute, you'll need to go through all these phases, like lexical analysis, syntax analysis, semantic analysis, and all that stuff. I will cover only 2.5 first phases, lexical analysis and syntax analysis, because semantic analysis, it's something pretty complicated, and I won't be going into that detail, and I won't be talking at all about code execution and stuff, because, well, it's already written in our language, and it's not something that the tool that I want to talk to you about is, yeah, it won't help with code execution. And the tool I'm going to talk about is Tricitter. Tricitter is a very cool library. It's written in C, and it allows you to generate parsers for any kind of language you want. I mean, I've taken this description right from the GitHub repository, and it kind of shows you the idea of the library. So it allows you to define grammar, and then it will generate the C code for the parser. It will generate pretty efficient code, so the resulting parser will be blazingly fast. I mean, it allowed me to parse source files with, say, thousands of lines in tens of milliseconds, so I think it's pretty awesome. And yeah, the main mode of usage for it is to be used as a Node.js package. Yeah, it will have some implications later, so that's why I want to mention it here. Let's start looking at how you might use it. Here we have an example for JSON grammar. It's also, you can have a look at this grammar on GitHub. It has its own repository, and I think these two pieces of code, it's already like 1/2 of the grammar of JSON grammar. The other half takes the various types of number literals like hexadecimal or octal or with floating point or without it. I wanted to give you a chance and try to spot an error in this grammar, because there is one, and I filed an issue on GitHub repository for it. But first, let me explain what's going on here. Do we have, yeah. So the grammar is described as a simple, do we have any kind of pointer here? Okay, but I think I'll just use this pointer. So, sorry. Дай, что происходит? Спойлеры. Так, она работает? Yeah, so we have a grammar here. We define, Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, yeah, we have rules. Rules are defined as GS functions. You see here, well, the name of the function is the name of the construct, the name of the node you want to have in your grammar. So for example, in JSON, the root value will be something like object, array, or a number, or a string. Then the object will consist of pairs, and array will consist of comma-separated values. But yeah, the question still persists. There is an error, and if you've used JSON ever, you might just spot it. So anyone? No? Well, I guess the error here is that you cannot use numbers as keys in JSON. And you can see here that object is the comma-separated pair of key-value pairs, and you cannot really use numbers, and this is the error. And I've fixed it and filed a pull request. Unfortunately, I guess the author of the package hasn't looked at it yet. But yeah, it will come in handy later, because by spotting this error and exploring it, I was able to look at the unit tests that are in tree-seater library. But yeah, so first you write these kind of rules. They are very straightforward. You just see that there is a function choice that allows you to define that at the root there might be any kind of construct like object or array. You have this kind of function that is called sec. It's short for sequential. It says that for defining array, you first have to put this square bracket, then comma-separated values, and that's so on and so forth. And yeah, that's pretty it. So this already is a very useful syntax for defining your grammar. Here we can have a node extras that defines that everything that is a white space is not a construct in our language, and therefore we won't use it. So yeah, let's go further. Then you run npm install. It will compilate your tree-seater CLI dependency. It's a command line tool that might come in handy later. We might use it to generate our code. You see the third step where you run this tool, and by running tree-seater generate, you will generate from this GS file the C code for your parser. It's pretty messy, so you don't have to look at it. Then you run npm install again to compile the parser, and then it's already done. So you've by running npm install the second time, you've compiled the parser, and you can use it by using the tree-seater CLI command line tool, or by importing your Node.js package. So here's an example of the files you'll end up with when you run tree-seater generate for the first time. You see parser H, parser C, it's the source code for your parser. Binding CC is the C code for the Node.js binding for your package. Grammar GS is the grammar.js is the original file that you've started from. Package.json is the the definition of your package that you need to have in order to compile all your stuff. And the most interesting thing here is the grammar.json file. It's generated from your grammar.js file, and it might be useful for enabling some kind of cool support for your grammar in your tools later. For example, you've seen the syntax here. It's JS functions. It's not really usable, but when you have grammar.json, you have declarative grammar, and you can use it later. I haven't used it yet, but I plan to use grammar.json to enable some kind of autocomplete or stuff. This is an example what you can have by running the tree-seater CLI tool. So on the left, you have a simple JSON document. On the right, you have the command line output from your tool, and it shows you the resulting AST, abstract syntax tree, and it also shows you the ranges of the characters in your file. The numeration obviously starts from 0, so you have the value that takes all the file, and the stuff like object with pairs, with the first one is string number, the second one is string array, and this third one is an object, and so on and so forth. So you, by writing your grammar.js previously and running the command line tree-seater tool with an argument parse, you can already have this kind of support, and it already enabled me to test my grammar on all the source files that we have in our project. But it's not the main intended usage. The main intended usage is to use it as a Node.js package. More on that later. Here we can have here it's another pretty cool, I think, feature of this library, and it's an ability to write unit tests. You just define them in this kind of format, the name for the unit test, the value that you will parse, and then the abstract syntax tree that you want to end up with. And if you run three-seater test, you will have this kind of nice output that will say that, yeah, you passed or you haven't passed your tests, and anyone who have created their own language might agree with me that it is very, very important to write your tests. It's very important to have a comprehensive set of tests that will help you with the refactoring, with the evolution of your language, that when you will change something, it will allow you to see what breaks and fix it. Here is the list of the grammars that are already available in Tricital library. It's pretty comprehensive. I haven't put, say, like 2 or 3 languages that I don't know myself, so it's not really a good example. In development are grammars for C# and Haskell. And yeah, this list is pretty comprehensive. I've seen that, I guess, some editors, some companies might want to look into it by enabling support for this kind of grammar definitions in their products, but I'm not aware of them yet. So yeah, but if you want to build something for Go or Python or PHP, then you might use this kind of grammar. And if you've seen the syntax of the grammar.js file, it's very straightforward to use, and it's very easy. And yeah, I had great pleasure using this tool. There are already existing bindings for different languages. The JavaScript binding for Node.js, the author of the library wrote himself. The Rust, Haskell, and Ruby bindings are also available, but there is no Python binding, unfortunately. So at first I wanted to write my language server in Python, but yeah, it's not really an option. And I've seen the source code, the C++ source code for Node.js binding, and it's, yeah, like several hundreds, thousands, yeah, several hundreds lines of code. So I decided I don't want to write that for Python in C++. I don't remember C++. So I decided to go on with Node.js. So the first part of my presentation was about the three-seater, the library that allows you to create parsers. And then the second part will be about language server protocol, which is the cool idea that Microsoft came up with which will allow us to put the parser, the three-seater parser, into any kind of editor and enable any kind of functionality we want to have with our language. So what is the language server protocol? It's the idea that you'll need 2 entities to to parse the source code of your languages, and those are client and the server. The client, it records the keystrokes of your editor. It sends the source code from the client to the server, and it listens to the responses of the server. And the server does all the heavy lifting. It parses the code, it produces the AST, it produces all the diagnostics and reports the errors, and implements all that stuff that you are used to using in the modern IDEs, like go to definition and find references and stuff. But you might want to ask why split this in 2? It complicates things, and the answer is it has a lot of benefits. The major benefit is that it solves the m multiplied by n problem. That means that if you want to support m languages in n editors, you'll have to write m multiplied by n plugins or programs or whatever. And yeah, it grows pretty quickly. There are hundreds, I guess, if not thousands, of already existing programming languages. But with LSP, you only need to write 1 language server, and then you will have to write, you'll have to write a plugin for each editor, but it's still n+1 and not n multiplied by n, so it's a great improvement, and I think it's a cool idea. The other benefit from it is that you are not tied by the technology that the editor uses. You don't need to learn Hacky, Lisp, or whatever the dialect of Lisp Vim uses, or Emacs. You don't need to learn, say, JavaScript for VS Code. You might just want to write
language server in a language you already using, and I've seen examples like XML language servers written in Java and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and there are already a lot of language servers. This is an example of the website that Microsoft has for language servers. It has the specification, all the available methods for the language. It has the section of implementations, and there are lots and lots and lots of implementations. There are even like separate implementations for the same languages, so you might just choose whatever you like better. Here's an example of request and response. I haven't mentioned it there, but language server protocol is a JSON RPC protocol. It's pretty self-understanding what JSON RPC is. You just send the JSON request, and it executes some kind of function and returns you the JSON result. Here's an example for the command, like find me the definition of the symbol in the file playgrounds/cpp/use cppy on the position, like line 3, character 12, and the server goes there and kind of parses the code, finds the definition, and says that, yeah, the definition for your word is here in the provide.cpp, starting here and ending here. And from now on, I want to show you like the examples of what kind of functionality language server provides. So what kind of methods it has and what you can do with it. So for example, here we have publish diagnostics method. It's sent by a server, and it allows you to show the errors in your source code. Here we have an example in PHP, I guess. Yeah. You can also send warnings, because there is a switch in diagnostic object that says whether it's a severity of error or a warning. There is an option to show something on hover. It's usually used for documentation or whatever there is. And I'm giving here an examples in VS Code just because I've looked into them the most, but I think it's possible to have this kind of support in any editor you want. It's I've seen implementations for IntelliJ IDEA-based solutions. I've seen language server clients for Sublime, and I guess for Vim, for Emacs, there are solutions. I've just haven't seen them. So here's an example for hover. Here's an example for signature help. It's the stuff that I've learned from IntelliJ IDEA-based ADS, and I think it's pretty cool. And I just want to enable this kind of stuff into the language we are using, because I think it helps. And yeah, you can do that with language server protocol. There is a method document symbol that allows you to parse the document and send all the symbols defined in the file, and it allows you to have this kind of stuff called breadcrumbs on the top, or the kind of stuff that's usually called outline or structure or whatever, that allows you to easily navigate your code. And here you can see I've already have that available in our code. Yeah, and I think it also allows you to navigate your code pretty easily, especially if your files are thousands of lines long. And this is the stuff that I think our designers might like the most. It's the ability to show what the color for this hexadecimal value is. And yeah, I think you are also able to change the color, like to choose another, and the value will change correspondingly. So yeah, I think it's cool. I haven't enabled that yet, but yeah, I want to, because I think it's cool. And the last one, and I think the most difficult one to implement, is the code action, and it's about all those useful things that that are, say, in PyCharm. It's with this light bulb. In VS Code, it allows you to do all the kind of intelligent stuff. Like you've missed the import, you might want to import the module from which the function you're trying to use, and yeah, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's very helpful. It's very cool that language server allows you to do this, but but yeah, it's also, I think, the most difficult to implement, and yeah, I will look into it last. Here I want to just stop for a second and ask the important question. I mean, all the examples were about VS Code. I've ended up just writing all the stuff that I wanted for VS Code, but why VS Code? Why not Sublime? Why not IntelliJ IDEA, something like PyCharm? For example, at work I usually use PyCharm and I like it, and if I had to write anything for myself, then I guess I would enable support for this in PyCharm, but I don't use Unbound that often, so I don't need it. Our designers, they're usually code in Sublime. They don't like VS Code because it's not that pretty, it doesn't look that good, and it's yeah, I mean, it's subjective, but I've asked a few people and they said to me that they also think that Sublime does font rendering better. I can say personally that Sublime is a little bit faster because it's written entirely in C++, but VS Code is something about C++, something about JS. So I wanted to write it for Sublime, but there is no Python binding, and there is already written Node.js binding by the author of the library, so yeah, I thought, well, why not? And it turns out that, yeah, it's pretty easy to enable this kind of stuff in VS Code. Another good thing is that there are these two kind of projects. The first one is the tutorial project from Microsoft, which allows, it's heavily documented project which explains what's going on. And the second one is the one that I owe the implementation of my extension the most, because it's the implementation of language server for the Bash language. And yeah, it helped me a lot, so it allowed me to do all the stuff for VS Code. I wanted to show you the demo, but I guess I won't be having any kind of time for that. But I have the laptop with me, so if you are interested, I can show you how it looks like. Yeah, just because I personally use PyCharm at work, I was thinking that, yeah, if I wanted to use something to create something for my own usage, I would have created that for PyCharm. And since I was here, I'm doing it here in JetBrains' office, I wanted to go ahead and look what it looks like to implement this kind of functionality in IntelliJ IDEA-based products. Well, I think the results are pretty controversial because it looks pretty heavy. All this stuff that there is in IntelliJ IDEA-based solutions, it does a lot. It can allow you to create your own parsers with Yak syntax. I think it's a little bit less understandable than the syntax that Tricitor uses, but it's still something that people used for ages. It allows you to create not only like add support for your language into the editor of your choice, but it allows you to create the whole IDEA. And it allows you to do things that are not in language servers yet, but that are useful, and you might be already used to using them in IntelliJ IDEA-based IDEs. For example, things like what we have here, like renames or save delete refactorings or surround with or whatever stuff there is. I've looked, there are examples of those implementations in the SDK. It's possible to do that. You'll have to learn Java for that, of course, and I think you'll have to learn how to deal with the complex Java projects like Maven, Ant. I mean, it frightens me a little bit because I haven't written Java for a very long time, and I haven't written large Java projects, but still it's something that it's worth considering because, yeah, because I mean, I wouldn't consider writing code in VS Code, like in Python, just because I think that IntelliJ IDEA, PyCharm, whatever, community edition or professional, it just serves me better. But yeah, if you want to look into something heavier than the editor, you might just go ahead and look up the IntelliJ platform SDK. You can just Google this kind of words, and on Google it will show you the the stuff that you might need when you write a plugin for IntelliJ IDEA-based IDEA. But yeah, I haven't went that way. I've explained why, because I don't use the Unbound myself. And when I finally created VS Code-based extension and wanted to share it with my colleagues, I've found that there is a problem, and it's a big problem, that the parser that I'm trying to use, it's written in C, and in order to use it as a Node.js package, I have to compile it. And in order to compile it, I have to compile it with exact same Node.js version down to the third digit after the second dot, and yeah, it's messy. It works on Ubuntu. I haven't been able to do that on Windows, but if you do this kind of stuff, it's easy to do because it's just a server and a client. They are bundled in the same extension, and most of the people who are writing support for their own languages in VS Code, they do this kind of stuff, and it's how it should work, but you won't be able to do that unless you agree to stick to some version of VS Code and compile all your stuff for that kind of Node.js runtime. There is another option, but it has its own drawbacks. So you might write client as an extension and write server as a separate Node.js package. Well, you solve the problem, but you have another problems arising. You'll have to install server as a separate package that will allow to have incompatible server and clients if you upgrade your extension and you introduce some breaking changes. You will have to have Node.js installed. You'll have to have all the stuff that is required to compile your extension binaries, say like compilers, GCC or whatever. And yeah, it's a mess. I've looked into GitHub issues and they haven't solved that yet. They are even considering saying that you cannot use native Node.js modules in VS Code extensions. So yeah, if you want to use this kind of stuff, these are the things you'll have to deal with. I think for us, it's a viable solution just to stick with the one version of VS Code and then update it like once in 3 months or once in half a year, because yeah, there is no other way right now. But what I want to talk about now is how you might just go ahead and implement the stuff that you want to add into your editor for your own language. And I want to show that it's actually, when you already have AST, when you already have written the parser, it's very easy to do the basic stuff that you want to have. For example, how to provide diagnostics. The tree-sitter parser will show you that the node, is it erroneous or not? Is there a node missing at this point or not? And what you can do to provide diagnostic to draw all those red squiggly lines under the erroneous lines of code, it's just to traverse the AST, find error nodes, and publish general diagnostics like syntax error or there's something missing. I've mentioned the grammar JSON, and I think it should be possible to provide intelligent diagnostics. By that I mean that grammar JSON allows us to say that at this point we expected something like right parentheses, but we have here a digit or a letter, and yeah, we might just explain that in an error message. It should be pretty straightforward. I haven't done it yet, but I think it should be. How to implement go to definition, it's also pretty easy. You just look at your grammar, you say that what is the definition and what is reference. For example, with functions, that's the definition of the function body and the call. And then you traverse the AST, fill in the maps, which look like this. And that's all the preparation work you'll have to do. And every time that someone asks you to find the definition, you identify word on the cursor. I guess you just go to the right and to the left until you find the white spaces or whatever characters you don't consider significant in your language. Then you have that word and you look into your maps and find the positions and the URI. By URI, I mean the file where this definition is located. You see, to find the definition you'll have to have a reverse map, like from definition to URI end position, but I didn't do that because you'll have to maintain 2 maps then, and it's, yeah, it's just more work, and it works pretty well for me because there are no definitions, not too many definitions, not too many references in our files, and that's why it works. But yeah, to speed up the things, you might need to have reverse maps. How to, yeah, these were the examples of the how you might want to implement IDEA-like functions. But if you have a look at these slides, you see I haven't mentioned the grammar or the specific language at all. It's just something that is like algorithmic, that is independent of language. And what I'm considering is, you see here at the end of the slide, is creating language agnostic extension. By that I mean that it should be possible that you just write your grammar.js and you copy paste it in somewhere in the extension, then compile it, and you should be able to do all that stuff and enable the things that you want to have in for your custom language in the VS Code editor. What I want to have in our languages for Unbound and Unbound 2, maybe to write unit tests, maybe to replace our own parser with a tree-seater based, maybe yes, maybe no. Yeah, as I said, we might want to consider providing intelligent diagnostics. We might want to consider providing better autocomplete based on grammar. We certainly want to display colors or add signature help. It's nice to have feature, but I think it's a bit complicated. And I mean, stuff that that's provided by the method code action of the language server, it looks pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to implementing it. But yeah, it looks pretty nice. So what you need to take away from this presentation? I wanted to show you that breaking into the land of writing parser and compilers is pretty easy, especially with this library. I mean, I've went from wanting to write LSP to already writing it in like 1 day, and I like this library very much. I want to learn how the parser works because I think the guy did awesome job implementing it, and it works absolutely great. The thing is that the only thing that stops me from looking into it a bit further is that I don't know how the how all that stuff works, how it generates the code, what the C code does. It's pretty complicated, and yeah, it's like a black box for me right now, and that's why I won't be doing that into production. I won't be putting this parser into production unless I know how it works, and yeah, that's something I will be looking into later. The language server protocol idea is very good, and I think Microsoft did a very good job implementing it, and I think it's the future for all the IDEs and editors, and for all the language-based stuff in the future. I think that you might also want to consider implementing everything you might want to for IntelliJ, just because it allows you to do that easily and with not so. It allows you to do that easily, and if you are content with writing a little bit of Java, then you might end up not with editor with support of your language, but with something a little bit bigger. I guess I've skipped that slide, but the one thing that I like about IntelliJ idea ADS that I don't have in our solution, in the solution in the VS Code extension, is that it allows you to create indices and to parse the AST that is already stored on disk, and it's already stored there in binary format in a pretty compact form. And yeah, it sped up things quite a bit, and if you have a lot of code, it will the SDK that IntelliJ platform provides, it will allow you to create indices for your languages. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you. And Any questions? Yeah, sure. Let's start with you.
Check, check. So you've already mentioned that you're considering replacing tree-sitter with something native in JavaScript, which probably a better idea, so we don't have to deal with packaging and stuff. But I wanted to mention that there is a tool called Package, PKG, for Node.js. It can kind of package your app into binary, which already includes Node.js. And as far as I know, it also supports native libraries. So you can try that. I mean, you can just ship this binary with your extension and run it. So maybe it will help you with the current code base. But yeah, I guess it makes more sense to replace tree-sitter with something else.
Well, I don't really understand the question that you're saying.
No, it's not really a question. It's I just want to give you advice to try to this tool package.
No,
PKG.
I mean, you've said that I want to replace tree-sitter, but I've said that I don't want to. I mean, I've considered using this tool and like using it in production. I mean, I want to use this parser for our own language parsing stuff. I don't do that right now just because I don't know how it works. And I know, I mean, I can use it, but I use it as a black box. I don't know how the parser generates.
Yeah.
I see that it works. It works well on tens of thousands of lines of code, but I don't know how to fix stuff when it breaks. And that's something that stops me. But other than that, it allows us to, it allows me, firstly, to write the fast parser that is written in C. And yeah, I think your tool is a very good thing to bundle the stuff that I won't have to deal with binary incompatibility with the VS Code runtime and the binaries of my package. And yeah, thank you for that. I will consider it.
But now, for now, you just build for a specific version, right?
Well, the thing is that this is something that I do like for my own fun, and I haven't done it yet. I mean, it's working on my laptop in Ubuntu, but all of our designers, they are working on Windows, and I've tried building binaries for Windows, and I haven't had success yet. But yeah, I'm considering something like whether it's your solution or building the binaries for the specific node version.
Okay, okay, thank you. And another question is not to you, but to JetBrains guys. What is your take on language server protocol?
I guess I can answer after the main speaker, not to spend his time questions.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you for your talk. In the beginning of the talk, you said that your Unbound language grammar specification has about 300 lines of code. Is it correct? Correct.
Yeah.
So I just opened the Python website and opened its grammar specification, and it's something about little more than 100 lines. But you said that Unbound is a very simple language.
Well, you see that what I am doing, it's more of an afterthought. By that I mean that we already using this language for say like 4 years or so, and there is already a parser written in Python for this. And what I am trying to do is that I don't want to be to use the parser that we have because it's legacy code. It's pretty I mean it's pretty bad code written in Python, and the most well, the main idea why I don't use it for all this kind of stuff is that I cannot use it for language server because it doesn't provide me with AST, with clear AST. It doesn't provide me with anything basically, because it was written for the for one goal, to kind of translate the source code in Unbound into something. I guess it translates it into XMLs, and then these XML files are parsed by ActionScript, and this is the way it executes. But yeah, why my grammar is so large? Well, because as I have already mentioned, I'm doing this as an afterthought. I'm just creating, I'm writing the grammar and kind of looking at the syntax and thinking that, yeah, maybe might be the grammar, and then I run it against our code, and I see whether it works or not, and then add another node and another node. So it's kind of messy work. I think that I might be able to shorten our grammar a little bit, but that's something that I've did like in a week, and I wanted just to share it. I mean, it's still very early to say that this grammar is complete, and the second thing is the first version of this language was created without any kind of grammar. It just kind of was glued together, and that's why the grammar might be so complex.
So it may become shorter?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, as I understood from your explanation of how LSP works, it kind of communicates between like processes which contains ASTs and user interfaces using like JSON or RPC. My question is, doesn't it create a lot of overhead, like in time? Like, did you notice like any changes in responsiveness in comparison like with natively written extensions for languages?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very good question because, as I said, like writing everything bundled in together is a better version. It's a little more performant, and here we are talking about two entities which communicate with each other by using this protocol, and JSON is not a lightweight protocol. It's not binary. But I haven't noticed anything worth mentioning because I think it's what I think is important is that both language and both language server and the client, they both run on the same machine. So network latency is not a thing. The second thing is, well, that depends on the complexity of your language, I think, because if you're writing something like C++ with heavy metaprogramming, then maybe this kind of stuff isn't for you because the language server that I've written for my extension is written in TypeScript, and it might not be as performant as something like written in C++ or even Java. So yeah, I haven't run into performance problems, and I think I won't be, but yeah, this is kind of trade-off. Yeah, it is a little bit slower, but it allows you to kind of have this split between client and server, and it allows you to as I said, solve all those problems, and I think it's worth it.
Thank you for your talk.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
LSP not only stands for Language Server Protocol, but also for Lumpy Space Princess. Just for your information.
and what's Lumpy Space Princess?
Adventure Time. Have you ever seen Adventure
Time? No.
But you missed an opportunity for a joke in the slide.
I guess.
Thank you. No one has questions? Oh, I just don't see you. Okay, so thanks you for your talk. We got this beautiful T-shirts just for speakers. Here's yours. Stepan, taken. Well, if you want to get yourself this beautiful T-shirt, you can come give us a talk. We are currently looking for a second speaker on our meetup on September 18. So, if you...
Speaking with us is very fun, and we are preparing... and I mean, we are preparing you and giving you a unique experience. So please don't hesitate. We are very, very helpful, and we are very funny to communicate with. Sorry.
Keep going.
No, sorry. I just.
This is Mitya. So we have like a couple of lightnings that will follow this talk. Oh, okay.
just a couple minutes ago, you mentioned that after the speaker ends, you're going to extend on it. Could you?
Yeah, at the moment, we don't support language server protocol in our products, and I cannot share any plans for doing that. There is a third-party plugin. You can download it from our plugin repository. It's provided by a third-party author. It's open source. You can look into it. Basically, the idea behind creating specific code analysis and specific code analysis solutions for particular languages is based on the fact that we want tight integration between different languages, first of all, in order to be able to do cross-language analysis. For example, in the context of Python and web frameworks like Django, or client-side web development like JavaScript and TypeScript, we want to be able to analyze a composition of languages like Python, Jinja templates, Django templates, your SQL queries, and so on. And this is the reason why we want to have a tightly integrated solution. Another reason is that the protocol may lack some extendability at the moment, but we keep our eyes open on solutions of various companies, and we'll see where it will go.
Thank you. Let's give a word to Vladimir with his lightning.
Yes, so hi everyone. My name is Volodya Shkoda, and I'm from Dell EMC. And today I'm gonna talking about the Redis descriptors and where to find them. It's a little bit fancy title, but anyway, I'm going to talk about descriptors indeed. And let's start from the basics. For those of you who don't know what Redis is, it's just an in-memory key value storage, and it supports such types as strings, hashes, lists, and other types we are not interested in today. And there is a good library for work with Redis. It's called RedisPy. And here you can see an example how to easily import it and create a client onto the host of with Redis. And also below you can see two methods. It's set and get. Set and just set the string with the key, and then we obtain this string by the given key. So it's about the work with strings. And what descriptors are? Actually, it's if you have ever worked with object-related mapper or RM, like from Django or another one, so you already saw, you already seen descriptors, and to implement descriptors is just are just a protocol, and you need to implement only this get, set, or delete. It's not mandatory to support descriptor protocol. And descriptors, they redefine basic attribute access behavior. And there is one more good Dunder method set name, which is available from version 3.6, and I'll show you later how to support it in 2.7. And yeah, so here we got like basic Redis descriptor. It's an, I hope you can see what's written there, and it's an interface. It has the descriptor protocol totally implemented, and it's an interface because it has one abstract method, get key name. I decided that it's up to user to define the key name because Redis is flat, so Redis doesn't have any tables. It's not you cannot just keep your values nested or something like that. So it's flat, and it's better to create a good key for name for your key. So in init you need to pass a Redis connection and picklink. Picklink is an optional parameter which is set by default to true, and it allows us to save the original data type, because as I said, when you just trying to set a value to Redis, it will cast everything to string. So you will just lose your data type without picklink. And here we've got like a simple implementation. So we've got get key name method overridden, and it just like a class name, primary key of our object, and a name of the attribute joined by colon. And also I set the Redis connection in the init. So, and the class meta class set name meta, it just allows us to use our set name dunder method from the previous section to know the name of the attribute we are assigning value. And let's create an example. So a class called student. It has like primary key and two attributes, two fields, name and average score. So it looks pretty much like usual model from Django or another RAM. So let's see, let's create a couple of students and see how it works. So in the very beginning, we will check that we've got no keys currently in Redis. It's true, and we create the first student with the primary key equal 1, and let's assign name John Gold and average score like 4. And then we will make sure that everything is stored, and that's true. So the keys are that we are expecting, and so let's create another one student with the primary key 2 and name like a list with the first name and last name strings, and average score as a float. So then we are checking and everything is okay. So when we receiving the value back, we see that the original data type is saved and everything is fine. And if we create, obviously, the student with the primary key we already had, we will see that name and average score returning from the Redis, so it already has values. And the keys are, you see the keys that we are storing currently. But the problem is that you can shoot yourself in the foot if you just will try, to change, to modify the value stored, for example, in the list, because you are receiving the copy of the value stored in the Redis. So that means that if you try to change the name of the second student, like Stan Smith to the Steve Smith, it will not do this. What can we do? In that case, we can just use a Redis list for that case. And Redis list, so as I said, Redis support that data type, and there are like a bunch of methods, I would say commons for work with the Redis list. but why not to create a Python class with our well-known Python list methods, such as append, extend, remove, pop, instead of that rpush, lrange, ln, and so on, in order not to remember just all of them. And so I wrote a just simple binding for that. It just takes in the init, again, connection to Redis, then key name, and optional iterable initial value. So we assigning list with one item, the integer 1, and then we can append and so on. So like work with the usual Python list. Even we can just make sure that if we create Redis list with the same key name but without initial value, it will not override the value stored currently in Redis, so it will just take the existing value. And with that said, we can just inherit our interface for Redis field, iRedis field, and create iRedis list field. So it with the dunder get method, it will return our Redis binding, and in the set, it's just a little bit complicated, I guess, for reading. But anyway, believe me, it just set the value to the Redis with the help of descriptor protocol. And so let's check how it will change our student class. So we've got like the implementation of Redis list field. It just in multiple inheritance from the our interface, and in implementation of Redis field with the same get key name overridden. And we are adding the subjects field. It's a list. So in order to keep the subjects student chosen. And so let's initialize subject with a list of two values, math and physics, and checking that it's stored. So, and we can easily append another value. So now we can change the list stored in Redis. And as you can see, we've got one new key for sure. It's student :1 subjects. And in the end of this presentation, I would tell you about two caveats that you can deal with. And first of all, as I said, you are working with copies. So we are using picklink and in order to save data type, but that means that you cannot change the value stored in Redis. For example, if we assign name of our second student as a dictionary with the keys first name and last name, and we want, for example, to change the first name to instead of Stan, to assign it to Steve. We will not succeed because we need like to declare to define one more variable and store the value there, change it, and set it back to the descriptor. So what can we do in that case? We can just create a binding, for example, for Redis hash. It's a dictionary. The problem is that Redis hash is it doesn't support nesting or nested type, so you can just it's flat again, so you can just set the key value. Value cannot be one more hash or something like that. And the second one, descriptors are defined on the class level. That means that you are working always with the instances with descriptor. If you again, we've got our first student, and average score is 4. That's okay. And if we assign average score to our class, like student average score with the string, we will see that our beautiful descriptor will turn in a pumpkin, and it just will be the string for all the instances we are creating. So like for new students, for previous students, it will always be a string. And here are all the references that I used. So the code of this Redis bindings and descriptors you can find on the GitHub. I have just I recently started to upload the code to the GitHub. So any questions, suggestions? Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you for your talking, and I have a question. Why, in which cases we need this? Why we not just use Django or M4? For
yeah, I was waiting for that. So actually, it started at work. So we had a challenge to run a deferred task, a big calculation. So, and we had before like in-memory properties, but we decided to move on Redis and migrate to Redis. And so like we've got a polar and a usual just the task, the deferred task. So and polar is just trying to ping all the values we are storing in the Redis. So it just like useful in-memory storage. So I hope I just answered your question somehow, but anyway, yeah. So of course, for sure, you can store it in the usual database like Postgres or so on. But it just about how you can make your work with Redis more Pythonic or something like this.
Okay, yeah. And another questions. Did you have something other classes for more
for more bindings? You mean? Yeah. I've got Redis dict on the way, but it's not on the on the GitHub yet. But yeah. So I don't have any like MapRoad or something like that. So, but anyway, yeah, I will upload the Redis dict, and maybe it's about like if you need it, you can just suggest and to implement it and so on. But yeah, for now I've got only Redis list on the GitHub and a couple of descriptors and a bunch of tests. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you.
So you mentioned first, thank you for your talk. It was very insightful. First question, I think you mentioned a couple of times in your talk that there is a couple of places where you can like easily shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Like, break the like model completely. Like from the talks of our other guys, I've seen like with descriptors you can do some sort of the reflection on the types you are getting, like in the get, the set. So maybe, I guess, if there are a way to implement protection in case of, you know.
Sure, I'm asking for the help, and if you know how to do something, let's do it together. I mean, I have not implemented it yet, but anyway, you're always welcome. So if you know how to create a descriptor for the values that are stored inside the Redis, so in order to change them with the reflection, yeah, it would be awesome. Yeah, so like that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we
of course, once again, and as always, can proceed with the questions after that. Thank our speaker, Vladimir Shkoda.
Thank you.
Thank you for having the talk. And now we will have once another lightning from me. Embrace. Clicker. Okay. Зачем? Он же работает. Угу. Там еще fullscreen где-то был, или это уже fullscreen? Окей. Окей. My name is Dmitry Nazarov, and as you can see, I'm doing some sort of events in St. Petersburg, for example, this one you're attending. And I will talk on the sort of weird topic, but rather important topic in my opinion. It's about how do you matter as a developer on the scale of the whole human colony, on the whole human race. Let's proceed with regular developer, which works in startup, regular one, I guess. And as you may know, almost all of the startups fail. But if you work in enterprise, okay, let me guess. How many of you work in startups? Okay, me too. How many of you work in enterprise? Switching. Okay. Any other option? Okay. Where do you work? Is that the option? Okay. I guess. But if you work in enterprise situation with your impact is no better, seemingly, because you're just a small cog in the machine. You do no change, as you may see. So, what do you do? What to do about that? And do you have any options? Actually, there are options, and there are a bigger scale, bigger image, and let me show you. First of all, there is great dangers to our human race, to our human colony. One of these is super volcanoes, and another one is atomic war. Another one is super bacteria, which can kill easily all the population. And another one is overpopulation. And this is just a few of the dangers to the human colony. So the obvious solution would be colonization. We need to deploy our race to other planets, other systems, in best scenario, other systems too. And this is the absolute must goal, one of the major goals which we face as the human colony. This is absolutely important, and the Musk understands that fully. He wants us to move, and he wants us to colonize space, and this is absolutely important for us. This is maybe the most important goal that we face right now. And the internet, the web, the IT technologies in general, and the web, the internet in specifically, is by the Elon Musk definition, the neural system of the human race. So we are, as the developers, doing the neural system in our entire race. This is very important, and we connect every every people on the, every human being on the planet, every device, be it router or mobile smartphone or server or cars or anything else. We connect everything about it into one network. This is great thing we do, and for example, we connect people in medicine. They can share their knowledge better, faster, work together, cooperate, and this is maybe the most crucial part of the human race right now, the internet and the neural system. Let me tell you one story, one small example, how you as a developer can be valuable, can provide some change, can do something important for the human race in whole. There is one guy, he's from Italy, his name is Nicola La Rossi. Who knows him? Anyone? La Rossi, thank you. This is Irina, organizer of PiterPy conference. So yeah, he visited PiterPy conference, he knows him. So this guy, he worked in small company, maybe he owns one, I don't actually recall. And he wrote a REST framework called Python Eve. And it's very handy, it's actually a framework based on Flask, so it's Flask application, and you can work with Eve like you work with Flask if you want to. But basically what Eve do is generates the whole REST structure, APIs, versioned, paginated, whatever, just from simple dict. So you have settings, in your settings you're putting your dict definition, your models basically, and that's it. You have working properly REST API in just 5 minutes. And it's real Flask, so you can modify it like you work in Flask. You can deploy it like you work in Flask. So this is very handy. And nothing special, right? Just a REST framework, and who uses REST anymore? So this is the logotype of Python Eve. But then the guys, the ladies, developers from SpaceX, got interest in that framework, and they actually started using it. And basically the noticeable part of SpaceX web, I'm talking, if I recall correctly, the inner web of SpaceX, inner services of them, are working on the Python Eve. So the developers, the engineers in SpaceX got so grateful to the Nicola La Rossi. So each year they sent him a big box of merchandise, like t-shirts, stuff like that, posters, and on the sad days, he told me once, on the sad days, Mitya, I'm sitting on my desk and I hate my job. Sometimes it happens with anyone, but I'm looking on the poster of SpaceX and I'm helping the humanity to move into space. But the guy just wrote a REST framework. He still did the impact. But there are other problems like ignorance, authority, prejudice, which we can face and fight, and we should. There are, of course, cancer, there are Alzheimer's, there are medical issues, there are many other problems. There are, this is not one of the problems, it's just, I've included that image to show you that the doing fun and acknowledging and discovering new ways of being entertained, new ways to have fun is also rather important. It's not a joke, we absolutely should and we would have fun, play games, stuff like that. So there are many applications of IT in general and particularly web, internet, and this is great. We are doing great stuff, but many of you are seeing, many of you have a probably false idea right now that if you're just doing your job, just living your life, just, I don't know, drinking beer or something, you're not doing impact on the humanity. This is wrong. This is false idea. You are doing that impact right now, listening to me on the Meetup, or later when you will share this idea, or, I don't know, every minute of your life doing every stuff. I don't know, okay? We need to get better internet, probably. Just a sec. Okay, the left one was the Medium post, and the right one was the family picture. So your every every action of yours are moving the humanity somewhere. Whenever you're doing code yourself, or you're sharing the knowledge, or you're bringing new, fresh ideas. For example, the idea of Logax of Andrei Sitnik was born in the bar with some other developers. And while, I don't know, while caring for your family, you're doing the impact too. Your every action is good and great in that terms. So I would want to say that you're awesome and you matter, and keep doing stuff you love. That's basically it. Okay, any questions? That's very holy war topic. Let's discuss that. You were first.
Firstly, thank you for such
inspirational topic.
Fun lightning about like cancer and super volcanoes and know,
atomic war and
all the human race. Yeah, it's really inspiring. And also, yeah, it's really like holy war prone discussion because on the one hand I agree, like the small things you do matter. On the other hand, like you do know, right, that every code you write anywhere has a very short lifetime.
Yes, okay, but that's not an issue. Yeah, that's just how the things go.
Yes, and so what I instead want to propose is some form of like enlightened nihilism, or maybe some Zen approach. Like there is a practice in Buddhism when you do a beautiful, beautiful picture from the sand. And you do it for months, and then you just kind of blow it away. I think it really encapsulates much of like what we do with the code. We write some beautiful stuff, it works for a while, and then we kind of blow it away and start from scratch.
But that's not the case with the Buddhism or this Buddhism practice, because in that Buddhism practice, all you achieve, but it's great, but still, all you achieve is like mental things or stuff like that. But in the code case, yes, you deleted the code, but you solved the task, and you moved the project or something.
I think actually that makes sense, that was been said, because, I mean, it's cool when your code lives forever. If you take a look at the source code of FreeBSD or Linux, the stuff that was written there, it's really, really old. This is really awesome, but don't write your code so it lives forever in a way that it's not usually the goal. The goal is to create a great product. If you make a great product, then your code will live with this product. If you don't make a great product, you will code die. That's the point. So code is not the first thing. Guess in a way that's the point.
Okay, the point of Lena.
I guess the way I see it.
Okay.
Right? More or less, yeah.
There was two questions there.
Thank you very much for the motivational speech about how we're going to die.
Sorry. Just a small detail. I wanted a suit with sort of crazy color, but I couldn't allow myself to take a blue suit because the blue suits are for motivational speakers, and fuck that. No, okay. I don't want to be associated with business trainers or business coaches. Or
I didn't finish though. I think the important thought about that was that we are inevitably going to die, and we should face it. And because this is going to happen sooner or later, somewhat sooner, we should really care about what we are doing, and we should care about who are near us. But my practical question would be a bit different. What differs if from the current standards like Swagger, which became OpenAPI, and gRPC, which we love because it comes from Google, and Google doesn't do anything bad at all.
You're mixing a lot of stuff together. The Flask is the framework, web framework, full stack based on Flask, very high level. So if the Flask or Django is high level frameworks, the Python Eve is super high level. It's based on Flask. And the Swagger you mentioned, it's a system for documentation. It's not a framework, it's not stuff like that. And the JSON RPC you mentioned, it's a protocol, I guess.
Yes.
So you're mixing in one thing, protocol, framework, and documentation system. Don't do that.
Okay.
No. I mean, you're nice, no, but don't do this.
Okay, I'll try not to do this. But the thing is, the idea behind that is that you have specification, high level or low level, and from that specification you get the working code.
Ah, now I get it. You mean like in Swagger, you're writing spec and you can generate APIs from spec.
Yes,
and
yes,
in Python Eve, you're writing like description of the models, and the Eve generates the API structure for you.
Yes.
But that's okay. That can be similar in a way, but no, that's not the same. At least one major difference between that is that in Python Eve, you don't see the actual, for example, API routes or something like that.
Is there any downsides to this approach? Because in the 90s, early 2000s, everyone in IT was happy with the idea of rational rows, UML diagrams, and one beautiful day, we could all replace programmers with these diagrams we could generate, but it didn't work, and it didn't work horribly. So my question is there any downsides to the Eve approach? Is there something that it doesn't do good? Because it obviously does good a lot of things, but what are the bad sides?
It's good from every side, except, I guess, the obvious downside that when you auto-generate something, it's not very customizable, not suits for the complex cases, for really, I don't know, cases when you have to do your own logic. And with REST, one day or another, you'll have to do some crazy magic. And with auto-generation, you will just you will not get the profits of it. You will start to write everything by the hand, and why do you need if you can take the regular Flask at that point? But for the small APIs, when you need a properly working with pagination, everything, semantic linking and stuff like that, you will get the working API with if in like really 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you for your questions. Anyone else? That was you. Yeah. Please pass the speaker for the.
Hope now to start hello again.
Let's start it. We're already on that point.
Okay, so you started with developers. What I want to stress is developing or just coding something is very different to being changing the world. So you put a good.
Sorry, once again, a little bit slower.
I want to oppose developers just writing code for fun, maybe, to those who change the world actually. As you put an example of enterprise and startup. So in startup, you're doing something useful to see. You see.
You're doing something useful, but it will fail. So
you try. So you try to solve the problem. You see the world. You see what it lacks, at your opinion, and you try to fill it. In enterprise, you often do what your manager told you to do. So probably you matter most when you do what you love doing. And not just developing, but being kind of your own product manager. That's what brings happiness to developers. So that's
that
what I
is
want
very
to point.
debatable, because I can counter argument you, because in, for example, enterprise, let's say one Russian company, they have mail for the users. And there are many users of that email service, and even small part, I don't know, like move one icon to the left a little bit, to the 2 pixels, but you're doing that change to the millions of people, and that is the change. And some people, I actually know them, they're real. They see that change as helpful as changing the world, and they love it. Because, and they would, such people, they would never go to startup because no one will see your changes most of the times, and why bother? They're happy in enterprise. So this is to each his own, I guess. I left Nazi phrases.
Sorry?
To each his own.
Okay. Maybe that's not exactly the point. I mean, for people who working in enterprise, I had a solid background in enterprise, who are not satisfied with what they have. You can always find something better. So just not stuck up there. Find opportunities, and as you mentioned correctly, in almost in every enterprise you can impact, even in your company, if it's not that big or large, just try to find what motivates you, what you're passionate about, and do it daily. Don't think about it, do it. So that was my idea.
Okay, I agree. Okay, at this point, I guess we are already on I don't know, motivational simple phrases. So I guess we will finish on that. Thank you for listening. And yes, we are, this rather the most important part of the evening. We are moving to the after party. Everyone who wants can join us, and it's like 7 minutes of walk from, yes, Quakin. Bar called Quakin. It's here on the Vasily Ostrovsky Island, and we're moving to it right now. So thank you all for coming. I hope it was fun or entertaining or experience or knowledge for you. Just remember, tomorrow is our breakfast. We have all information online. And 18 September, we have Paul Everett from USA speaking here at our PiterPy Meetup. Там есть Java и Android, на Meetup.com, да, ищи. Просто на Meetup.com заходишь, там вбиваешь, они по-любому должны быть. Все живут там.
Какое-то время его не было, потом сейчас вернули.
Да. Каждому свое, никакого отношения к нации не имеет.
Ты что, его же печатали на этих, на воротах концлагерей.
На воротах?
Они захватили эту фразу по-любому. Ладно, пойдем потихоньку.
На воротах печатали «Русь освобождает».
Только, там было много фраз. Окей, она была изначально латинская, но они ее взяли и с тех пор ее типа опасно использовать.
Да, но мне чего?
Ну ладно. Я хотел что-нибудь. Спасибо тебе, что ты была активной. Я бы тебе что-нибудь подарил, но у нас сегодня с тобой ничего нету.
Да,
Спасибо. Я понимаю, но надо же как-то мотивировать активность.
Не люблю молчание в зале. Вот. Мне кажется, прошло все круто.
Спасибо.
Фолдер.
Единственная проблема не слишком общая. Пойдешь?
Да.
Хотел у тебя спросить про...
Да.
Там через Барселону связано. Это тот сайт?
Это другой, speakup.com. Сейчас я покажу.
Можешь вообще рассказать?
Да. Сейчас увидимся на этом, как бы, я потом расскажу, что мы делаем. Speakup.com. Сейчас что-то делаю. И на пати. Мы делаем с мессенджером, фишки есть такие, что у нас есть транскрипция.
On device или...
Я учусь на девайсе.
сами эту технологию делаем. Мы юзаем... Да, мы гугловский API юзаем. Перекрестимся перед тем, как вытаскивать. Погоди, оно просто не сразу, наверное. Надо чуть подождать. Все, спасибо большое. Да, вот гугловский API юзаем скрипты, типа...
Сразу с тобой делаем.
Нет, именно гугловский, который Google Cloud Speech. Его используем.
Какой там прайс?
Сейчас точно не вспомню, что он типа
спрашивать, то просто не говори.
Не, он сейчас мы используем публичный прайс, который есть на сайте. Мы в будущем будем, может быть, делать.
Тебе футболку дали?
Да, спасибо большое.
Я не знаю, налей тебя.
Будет похудеть мотивация. Ну, да, сейчас я.
Ну такое, как бы, мне хотелось больше хардкода, но как бы я понял, что... Ну, мне просто не о чем рассказывать, потому что, как я говорил в конце, как бы я
у тебя очень хороший был толк в том плане, что он гораздо доступнее был моего, и типа более техничный вообще.
Да не знаю.
Я вот сейчас, конечно, наверное, немножко выше головы прыгнул, типа с абстрактными толками, потому что, наверное, не дорос до такой.
Ты мне лучше скажи, что ты имел в виду, что я не понял твоего вопроса.
Короче,
я собираюсь заменить.
Да, вот ты сказал, что хочешь заменить, или я неправильно?
Я сказал, что я хочу заменить трисильдером наш парсер, потому что он как бы написан давно, написан древний.
Короче, я просто типа из контекста этого пакетинга, то, что он тяжело растет.
Да, вот то, что
я такой подумал, что типа, да, почему типа, ну как бы, если у вас типа S-expression, то почему нельзя какой-нибудь full S-expression парсер? И типа вместо трисильдера.
Все как бы обсуждаем.
Да, ну короче, да, вот типа...
Мне трисильдер нравится тем, что он очень доступный.
Ну да. Не, если процепировать легко, это круто. Ну да, типа, короче, да, пробовал эту штуку, package, типа PKG называется. Я ее пробовал, единственное, что я не пробовал, короче, реально с нативными модулями этими работать. Там, скорее всего, есть какая-то пляска бумна, но вроде бы как вот, типа, он типа живой даже, вот чуваки юзают, и вроде можно запаковать как раз в отдельный бинарь, потому что я заметил, допустим, всякие, допустим, C++, это экстеншн для Visual Code, C-Sharp, C++, они как раз тоже бинари запускают, короче, и типа ты ставишь экстеншн, скачивают эти бинари и запускают. То есть, ну как бы, все вот так делают. И вроде просто ребята делают под версию, подстраивают под версию, короче, VS Code, оно все прям разваливают.
Ну, так можно просто схватить обновлять.
Вот, да.
Ну, то есть, да, я тут чувствую, что... Просто понимаешь, в чем проблема? Я вот как бы на Ubuntu мне все сделалось сразу. Я тебе могу даже, кстати, сейчас...
А, и сами типа, ну я такой раз был учиться. А вы сами делали?